Hi everyone, good morning. Thanks for attending. Thanks a lot for organizing this workshop. It's a great pleasure to be back in Korea, in Seoul. So my name is Arthur Charpentier. I'm professor at University of Quebec in Montreal, and currently I'm visiting Kyoto University for a year. And I will give a talk about what I call granularity, mutualization, and AI risk in insurance, which is very long, just to say that I'm going to talk about insurability. And my point is that when you look at the dominant narrative, when we hear about AI and insurance, it's usually very optimistic. The more data we have, the better the models, the better the pricing, the better insurance. But I think we need to step back a little and look at it and see that actually there's a lot of questions raised about insurability in this context of AI. So I will try to talk about two things. What I have in mind is to have two angles based on recent work I've been doing. The first one is about granularity and mutualization, which is a question I've been working on for the past 10 years, which is about the fact that having more and more information is not always a good thing. And insurance is based on the fact that there's a veil of ignorance, and we need insurance to cover for those possible losses. And the more data we have, the more difficult it might be to offer insurance for some people. And the second step will be about AI as a risk. The fact that sometime in many insurance contracts, people are using AI for a lot of things, and this will give us a lot of risks. I wouldn't say new risks, because I think in a lot of contexts, risks are already there. But there will be more concentration, more opacity, and it will be extremely challenging for insurance company to cover for those possible losses, right? So I wanted to take those two angles and to talk about that during this talk this morning. So first I will start with, there will be only one slide with equations. So I wanted to get back on something that we all know as actuaries, is the fact that there's a variance decomposition. So variance is just the variability of possible profit and loss. And in actuarial models, we always assume that there's a latent risk. Okay, we have heterogeneity in portfolios. Everyone is not equal facing risk. There's a latent risk factor, theta, that we do not observe. Okay, this is going to give us within and between variances, but we cannot observe it. And it's something that we should acknowledge. We will never observe the latent risk, but we can collect information. We can get data. Just think of motor insurance. You cannot observe the latent risk of everyone, but you can observe the color of the car, the address of the driver, the gender of the driver, and a lot of covariates that could help us to create segments, to create classes of risks, right? But it's not going to capture everything. Okay, there will still be something remaining. So if you get back on the variance decomposition, there's always this irreducible risk, the fact that there's always at some point, the idea of flipping a coin, okay? Even if I know everything about you, at the end of the day, I will never know who's going to claim a loss by the end of the year, okay? There's always a part of randomness. People are always flipping a coin. The thing is, the probability to get a tail is different for everyone, okay? What we want to assess as actuaries is not who's going to claim a loss, okay? That's not the goal of actuarial science. The goal of actuarial science is to get a fair an accurate estimate of the probability to claim a loss. Okay, everything is about assessing risks. It's not about trying to identify people who are going to die, or people who are going to get surgery, or people who are going to get a car accident. Okay, so there's always some part of randomness that we cannot get rid of. I mean, the day we will be able to get rid of this kind of uncertainty, there's no more insurance, right? We have a residual part, which is the classically the epistemic uncertainty, and this is where we have this big data coming in. The thing is, the more data you can collect, the smaller this variance will be, right? So this is what everyone in the insurance industry is trying to collect a lot of information about people, just to reduce this uncertainty. And as we will see, it can become extremely problematic when you can get very, very small classes of risk. And in that case, there's a lot of chance that people will not buy insurance because it will be way too expensive. Okay, so we still need to be in between this solidarity and individualization of risk. That's more or less what's underlying these mathematical formulas. This question of information is not new, obviously. There's a lot of discussion in economics of insurance, about information. The thing is, when you get back to all those papers that started a long time ago with Akerlof, with Rothschild and Stiglitz in the 70s, it's usually about asymmetric information. The fact that policyholders and insurance companies don't have the same information. Usually, policyholders have more information than insurance company. Okay, just think of all those papers we got 20 years or 30 years ago about genetic testing, when people could test for their genes and get more information that they will not share with the insurance company. So people in the 70s and afterwards were struggling about the idea of the future of insurance when you have such asymmetric information. That's not what I'm going to talk about today. What I want to talk about today is not asymmetric information, is more granularity. The fact that insurance companies have now more and more detailed information about people. Okay? Just think in terms of telematics, genetic data, behavioral traces, a lot of information that they can collect about policyholders. And I will get back about climate because there's a session about climate, and I think climate is a very, very important topic. In a lot of cases about climate, we have more and more information about policyholders, right? When you start using very granular data, you can say a lot of things, and you can distort mutualization that we need to provide insurance covers, right? So having more and more detail is usually, might not be a good thing. One of the issues I've been working on for the past years is about fairness and discrimination. Okay, in some cases you can assess a lot of features about people that you're not supposed to collect. Okay, in many countries you're not supposed to price based on genders, based on race, based on private information that is supposed to be sensitive. And now we have a lot of documentation about the fact that removing a sensitive variable is never a sufficient solution because of all the proxies you can get by collecting additional information. So granularity is this idea that you collect a lot of information that can give you a lot of insight about the policyholders, sometimes information you don't want to use because in many countries it's not allowed to use such information because you can predict sensitive attributes, but also the fact that actually you can predict with more and more accuracy the underlying risks of people, right? So this granularity is really an issue. Recently we've been working on the case of natural catastrophes. In the case of France, so France has a very unique system to deal with natural catastrophes, highly based on solidarity. Okay, it's a country where insurance is compulsory. The price is not exactly set by insurance company, but by government. Okay, so you pay your household insurance, and then you're going to have on top of your household insurance 20% of the premium dedicated to covering all kinds of natural catastrophes in France. There is an implied solidarity among everyone in France, right? But now we have some issues because we have maps, and actually official maps. Those are coming from the Ministry of Ecology. They provide extremely detailed maps about subsidence. So subsidence is a risk that is compulsory in France, which is the fact that you have shrinkage and possible problem with houses when they are built on clay because it's going to absorb and release the water. So it's going to make the houses less robust. And in that case, it's very easy to identify who's going to be at risk and who's not going to be at risk. And also about flood insurance. And you can see that the maps are extremely detailed. Okay, so it's more than per street. Okay, it's per blocks or stuff like that. You know exactly who's going to claim a loss or who might be claiming a loss in the future. So in that case, when you start using those maps, you can identify people with exactly zero chance to claim a loss and people with a very high risk to claim a loss. And the kind of solidarity we have is actually collapsing because the premium asked to people living in risky areas is amazingly high, right? And there's a lot of discussion in France about how to change the system because it's not going to work. Okay, right now they cannot do anything because it's compulsory. Okay, so they cannot change the premium to be risk-based. But what we see is actually insurance companies don't offer any contracts in some areas. So we got insurance company withdrawing from risky areas, which is not what the system was designed for. The idea of the system was to provide fair premiums to everyone, but when you cannot buy insurance because there's no insurance company proposing covers in your area, then we have a problem. And this is a problem we cannot face as actuaries, because when you look at it, most actuaries are working for companies. They look at their portfolio, and when you look at the portfolio, you just say, oh, I don't have anyone in this area. You don't know why. There's a lot of selection bias in insurance, but usually actuaries don't look at it. They don't know exactly why they got these people in their portfolio and what happened to the other people. And usually you don't care. You just say they're going to go somewhere else. But what if there's no somewhere else? What if people cannot purchase insurance, which is what we observe more and more today, right? So it's really about this question of using information. It's very related to the question of actuarial fairness. Actuarial fairness has to do with the fact that you want to have premium that reflect the risks. Okay, if you got the same risk, you should get the same premium. But equal risk is something that is very weird because we don't know exactly what it means. It depends clearly on the information you have, but there can be very different kinds of information. For instance, do we include or not sensitive attributes? Do we take into account those extremely detailed maps where we know exactly who's going to be hit at some point by flood events and who might not? Okay, so we have more and more information, and we need to use that. So there's a real tension between three concepts of fairness that we have in insurance, which is this opposition between actuarial adequacy, which is the fact that we want to get premium based on risks, right? So it's actuarial fairness, the classical notion of actuarial fairness. Then we have solidarity, where we accept that we will have cross subsidies between people, maybe handicapped people and non-handicapped people, okay, people with different sensitive attributes. And then there's one we started to discuss more and more with, especially with Olivier Coté, our PhD student, working on causal legitimacy in the context of premium. We want to have explanatory variables that have a causal effect on the outcome. Because if you have this causal link, possibly you can use that for prevention. Okay? But clearly we have a problem with those maps, because those risk maps we have in climate risk are, in a way, causal. Okay? They explain something that has a causal link with possible claims, right? So we even have a problem with causal legitimacy when we have climate risk. So it's really a big challenge, and I think we should spend a lot of time on those questions, because otherwise there will be a big problem in the market. People will not trust any more insurance company, and insurance is based on trust. Everything about insurance is trust. Okay, insurance is the fact that some people might have some future losses. Insurance is the contribution of the many to the misfortune of the few. We collect premiums, and then at some point we're going to pay back. If people don't trust the system, then they're not going to buy insurance. So trust is a key issue in insurance, and we need to have techniques that could give back this trust in insurance. And then the second part was about AI risks. Okay, so obviously we know that AI is a very interesting tool used by insurance company based on the idea that we're going to collect more data that should be based on risk, but also machine learning was going to give us better models that are going to help us to get better estimates of the underlying risk, right? But I think in many lines of business, it will bring a lot of additional losses, because not only insurance companies are going to use AI, but also policyholders. So in many contexts, policyholders will be using AI for different things. Okay, just think about a company like a hospital who's going to use techniques to make triage. Okay, so they're going to get some sort of LLM, some chatbot asking question. What happens if we have a problem in triage and we have people that were supposed to be going to surgery and we don't get surgery, not because a doctor said so, because in that case hospitals will be liable for that, but what if it's a chatbot? Who's going to be liable for that? Okay, so we have a lot of cases where actually, so it's not really a new risk, it's not a new line of business, it's just the fact that in many insurance lines, there might be some possible AI-related loss because there will be AI-based techniques used to do things. And I don't even mention the case of critical systems, okay? What if we got crashes of planes because of a problem in the design of softwares? and I will talk about that later on, but in the context of vibe coding, which is what we have more and more, the fact that people don't code anymore, you just write a prompt and ask an LLM to write a code. What happens if we start to get crashes of planes or problem of nuclear plants? Okay, in critical systems, we still need to have software computer guys working on those codes and not machines. We need to understand exactly what happens. So it's really about the fact that in many already risky contracts, there might be additional risk coming from AI. So I don't think it's a new risk. I think it's really more a combination of something which is kind of new, but also relate to things we know as actuaries and we've been working on for the past 20 years. It's the fact that we have a lot of correlation, okay? Because a lot of companies are going to use the same API, the same data, the same languages and so on. So there's a lot of correlation. There's a lot of opacity, okay? We have more and more codes that no one has been reviewing, okay? The scale, because it's coming extremely fast. 5 years ago, only a small part of the code was AI-based by generative AI. Now I think a lot of, not to say the majority of the code produced is generated by AI, right? So we have a lot of opacity coming extremely fast, a lot of updates that no one really controls, and it's very difficult to have what I call ex-post attribution. When you have a claim, you want to understand why, okay? And the thing is, nowadays, it's really complicated to understand why we got a claim, and since we have this increase of the speed, looking back at what happened will take some time. And that during that time, when you want to investigate and understand why we got a problem, there might be also additional claims coming in, right? So it's really about dealing with the speed of AI that could bring us new risks that we have to deal with. A lot of accumulation, okay? A lot of things about the fact that there's a shared technological infrastructure. When you look at it, AI is really something that you have in maybe 5, 6 companies in the world. So they control a lot of things. So it's becoming extremely synchronized. When you start to have a problem, you have a lot of problems everywhere. There might be a little something that might help us. It's when you think about generative AI, it's the fact that there's already a little bit of a randomness, which makes it extremely difficult to replicate. But I think it might be a good thing because it's going to bring us some little randomness. So some company will have problem using one prompt, and other companies won't have the same problem with exactly the same prompt, just because of the same randomness. So it's kind of good, but I think the trend is quite bad already. The fact that companies are using really the same kind of tools, softwares, and API can be extremely problematic, and we don't know exactly how to deal with that. Just think of using LLM. A lot of companies have now built-in chatbots built on their old data set. What if you got a bias in the data set? What happens if the LLM, which is just usually a big neural network or a predictive model, but based on data sets that were biased? Who's reliable in the case of a problem coming out from the message of the API? Just look at what happened recently. Some companies, especially I think of Google, that was blamed because of the poor accuracy of the answers of their LLMs. So now we got trials. Some AI companies are sued because of the API they provide. We see more and more problems coming from all those AI techniques, right? Then we start to have also discussions about experts. So I just mentioned a very recent study asking international experts about AI risks in various domains. So we start to get some feedback about the industry, because we have to admit that we don't know much about what's going on in the software industry. I mean, actuaries are not trained on that. It's very difficult to understand what's going on, and it's going extremely fast. So what we can see is that actually the industry, the software industry, is extremely concerned about the risks. And I think as actuaries, we have to look at it, because at the end of the day, insurance company will be asked to cover for some possible claims asked by some companies, hospitals, or whatever, claiming that they got a loss, and at some point there will be AI in it. Okay, so it's something that we see more and more. It started with LLM a few years ago. So LLM was a big buzz. I mean, it's extremely interesting. There were a lot of discussion about hallucinations, but I think hallucination is not the issue here. It's really about try to understand what happened, okay? Try to understand exactly how LLM were deployed within companies. Try to understand exactly what happened. The problem is it's going to be extremely difficult because it's extremely easy to implement LLMs. But when you face a problem, try to get back to the roots and understand what happened will be extremely costly. And I don't see any incentives to do so. There will be a lot of problem because of the fact that there's a lot of changing environments. API keeps changing. It's very difficult to do again what happened 6 months ago exactly with the same prompt. So it's very difficult to replicate what happened and to see the downstream losses. And I don't really see how we can go further on that question. We're glad that we got some colleagues, especially in Montreal, working on those questions. Try to trace what happened when you use LLMs in the industry. Human in the loop is extremely important, but again, I don't see how we can find people who have time, competence, authority, and incentives to do so, right? So we need to spend more time on that. And the last issue, I think, is, maybe I can skip this one because I think I will be running out of time. I think we have to get back on the fact that vibe code is becoming more and more important. Vibe code is the fact that you don't code anymore. You just write a prompt, you get a code, you put that in a system, everyone is doing so you got a chain of a lot of codes. No one really knows exactly how we got it. And we start to see more and more some reverse engineering about prompts. Like you look at the output and you try to understand what happened at the beginning. Why people had this code, what did they write in the prompt. So vibe coding is a real issue, and it clearly turns software risk into provenance risk. We try to understand exactly what happened at the beginning, so we need to find the path of problem that we faced when we face a loss. So I think I'm going to stop here and leave room for other speakers and questions. Thank you.